Canada's AAA credit rating could be in question, especially after the Trudeau era. It has been released that Canada has received a D rating for fiscal accountability.
I hope we would agree that if we can't admit there's a problem, we're not going to fix it. So now Canadians deserve honesty about how their taxpayer dollars are being spent and tracked. And recently, the federal government got a D rating for fiscal accountability from the CD Howe report. Do you agree with that grade?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. I would ask my Deputy Minister to comment on this technical question, please. Thanks.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So that rating is given to federal and provincial jurisdictions, and it's largely, in this case, based on the timeliness of documents as well as the quality. My understanding is the federal government does very well on the quality and comprehensiveness. We are behind some of our provincial colleagues in terms of how early public accounts and budgets have been tabled.
Unfortunately, if we don't own our failure, I don't know how we're going to promise reform. But Mr. Ali, I see public accounts as the government's final report card, the audited statement showing how much was really spent and earned. Now, last year's books were released in December, so 8 months late. When will you be tabling the public accounts for this year? Just a date.
Thank you. Chair, thank you for the question. We plan to table the public account in coming weeks, well in advance of the legislated tabling deadline, which is December 31st. Thank you.
So, Minister Ali, I hope you agree also that Canadians shouldn't have to wait months to find out what's going wrong. If families miss a mortgage, they can't just stay silent. So I don't think neither should the government. So will you set a standing rule, as was suggested in that CD Howe report, that any future delay must be publicly explained within 48 hours with a new date, yes or no?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Our government is committed to building a more open, accountable government. That's why we launched the Trust and Transparency Strategy to strengthen openness and rebuild confidence in our institutions.
So was that a yes then?
I can say that we're committed to building a more open and accountable government, and transparency is strengthened to openness and rebuild confidence in our institutions.
So that something like that would definitely be a great way to show transparency.
We're committed to transparency and accountability. That's what I can
Minister,
assure you.
Right now, Canadians need a PhD to find the bottom line. They want a clear front page summary, a simple table showing the big numbers up front instead of buried hundreds of pages deep. So a one-page at a glance means taxpayers, journalists, MPs, we can all see at a glance how much is coming in, how much is going out, and how deep we're in debt. So in the next budget, will the first 15 pages show a one-page at a glance, total revenue, total spending, deficit surplus, and debt, yes or no?
Chair, through you, thank you for the question. My colleagues just want to remind you, you cannot have one pager of the household budget. This is we're talking about country's budget. So these public accounts will be tabled well ahead of their deadline, and it will be detailed and it will be public. Thank you.
So right now, parliamentarians and Canadians actually can't tell if the government's staying on budget. And a side-by-side table, for instance, in the Fiscal Monitor would make it easy for us to see when spending is off track. Will the Fiscal Monitor actually include a side-by-side versus the original budget, so for revenue, spending, and balance, yes or no?
I'd just like to remind my colleagues, we have rules and we have regulations, and legislation says it's December 31st is a deadline to table public accounts. So we will have well in advance the legislated deadline, the public accounts, but I'd like to
sorry, I'm really short on my time, so I have a number of questions yet. Minister, especially on transparency and accountability, the difference between what was promised in the budget and what actually happened was far too big last year. Would you agree?
Again, it's, I think it's a new timeline of presenting a budget. I think this will streamline more, it'll give more clarity.
So do you agree, yes or no?
We would have main estimate ahead of time. And
Do
then
you
budget.
agree, yes or no, was my question?
I could based on facts, what we have there. It's not about my opinion,
Thank
what
you
we have
very
in
much.
legislation.
That is our time.
And in typical fashion, he just runs out the clock instead of answering the question.
Pleasure to return and to be back at the Government Operations Committee. Minister Ellie, like many Canadians, I'm very interested in seeing next week's budget. I'm particularly concerned that your government has abandoned your fiscal anchors. I will remind you that in 2024, the fall economic statement, that these anchors were to A, maintain a declining debt to GDP ratio, and B, uphold Canada's AAA credit rating. In the last few weeks, however, these anchors have seemingly disappeared. The PBO, in his September 25th report, stated, due to persistent budgetary deficits of over 1% of GDP, the federal debt to GDP ratio is projected to increase from 41.7% in 2024-2025, rising above 43% over the medium term. It is no longer projected to be on a declining path. On our AAA credit rating, the Financial Post headline from yesterday asks a clear question. Does Canada still deserve its AAA credit rating? Minister, I would argue that, as the PBO has stated, our debt to GDP ratio will be rising, that the deficit will rise to a minimum of $68.5 billion, not a small number. And that is without adding recent spending commitments from your government. It is valid to wonder, when your budget is tabled on Tuesday, will the reaction from the markets be that Canada still deserves its AAA credit rating? I'm not convinced. The Prime Minister refers to himself as a financial budget expert. However, based on reports from the PBO and other economists, Canadians are having trouble seeing this. So, Minister, on Tuesday, when your government presents its budget, are you purposely wanting it to fail so that an election will be called before Canadians feel the true economic effects of your government?
Solid question.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'd like to thank my honorable colleague for the question. As you know, that this government has committed to balancing its operating budget over the next 3 years. And in this context, the government is undertaking a comprehensive expenditure review to ensure government spending is responsible and deliver results for Canadians. With that phased approach over the next 3 years, organizations have put forward proposals where they can find saving, so we can find those savings and invest in the priorities matter most to Canadians. So that is coming forward, and more. I think it's this question related to Finance Minister who's presenting a budget on November 4th, and I believe this would be a generational budget. There would be investment in Canadian Armed Forces, in infrastructure, and Build Canada
Thank
Home.
you. Minister Lightbound, last week the Auditor General released yet another report that outlines your government is failing when it comes to contracts. On the CRA call center with IBM, your government oversaw the ballooning of this contract from $50 million to $190 million, and results weren't even met for Canadians. Earlier this week, the department said the government had learned a very hard lesson. But, Minister, when Canadians make a typo on their tax filings, the CRA doesn't accept their plea that they've learned their lesson. The CRA goes after them with the full weight of the federal government for the money owed. However, when it is your government that makes contracting errors, doesn't validate invoices, or scrutinize to ensure the money being spent is actually for a service provided, your department believes that learning a hard lesson is enough. On behalf of Canadian taxpayers, Minister, no, it's not enough. Even worse, last week was not the first time the Auditor General had delivered this message. Your government has been consistently criticized by the Auditor General on the lack of scrutiny, validation, and competition for multi-million-dollar contracts. In June, after tabling her audit on GC strategies, the auditor was extremely clear. The government need only follow the existing rules on procurement and contracting. It's clear that your government throws value for money out of the window at every single opportunity and instead rewards Liberal friends and insiders when developing contracts. Minister, when will you and your government listen to the Auditor General and finally ensure your departments and agencies follow the existing external contracting rules?
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et à travers vous, et merci à...
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my honourable colleague for the question, through you. I reject the premise of several of her questions. If you look at what the Auditor General said in the most recent report in June, it's clearly said that the rules must be followed. There were no new recommendations made. The Auditor recognized the previous report's recommendations had been implemented. That's what we're doing. We're implemented everything that was submitted by the AG to ensure that we had transparency and competitiveness in our contracting process. Now, regarding specific contracts,
but perhaps you can finish with Ms. Suds's.
A D rating for fiscal accountability. I can only imagine if this budget passes, and I know technically you can't go lower than a D, but somehow this current Liberal government will find a way to do so. And what is with the Liberal Party and balancing budgets? Based on all the investments Mark Carney claims he wants to make, this budget will not balance itself. And with the billions of dollars he plans on spending, there is no counteract that could recoup that much. Anyway, I would like to know what you think down in the comment section below, and have a good one.